I was already zipping up my jacket by the back door when Simone said, from somewhere behind me, "You always do that right when it gets good, you know." I stopped with one hand on the door handle. It was a Tuesday night in late October, and Garrett's apartment had been warm all evening, too warm, the kind that comes from too many people standing in a kitchen, laughing over bad wine and leftover pad thai. I had been fine for most of it. Easy even. I had talked about hockey with Garrett's neighbor, helped move the folding table when someone needed more space, made a joke about the Toronto Maple Leafs that landed well enough. Then people had started setting down their cups and actually talking. Not performing. Just talking. Garrett had started telling everyone about his dad's health scare last spring, and the room got that particular quiet, honest and a little heavy, and I had felt the old familiar pull. Keys in hand, coat on, somewhere to be. Simone was leaning against the kitchen counter with her arms folded, watching me like she had been expecting this exact moment. I gave her the smile I usually gave people when I wanted to exit cleanly. "I've got an early shift. It's 9:15. Traffic on the Queensway. You live 6 blocks away." I laughed once. It came out flatter than I intended. Simone was Garrett's older sister, 26 to my 28. And she had been living in his spare room since the summer. After something in Vancouver hadn't worked out the way she'd planned. I had known her in the background of things for years. The person who showed up at Garrett's place for Thanksgiving, who texted him when his car wouldn't start, who made coffee at the kitchen table while the rest of us came through the apartment like a minor weather event. I had never had a real conversation with her before that night. "It's not a big deal," I said. "I'm just tired." "Sure." She tilted her head a little. "You were tired last month at the rooftop thing too. And at the Whitefish Lake weekend you disappeared before the bonfire got going." That made me look at her properly. "You've been keeping track? You're easier to notice than you think," she said. I didn't know what to do with that. Through the wall I could hear Garrett's voice rising a little, the way it did when a story was getting to the part that mattered. Someone said something soft in response. Someone else laughed, not loud, but real. "People are just talking in there," Simone said. "That's all that's happening." "I know what's happening. Do you?" She wasn't being sharp about it. She said it the same way you'd say it about a crossword clue you weren't convinced someone had actually solved. "Because you leave every time the room goes from easy to real. Every single time. Like you have a sensor for it." That landed somewhere I didn't like. I looked past her at the window above the sink. Outside, Elgin Street was doing its regular Tuesday thing. Someone walking a dog, a streetcar going by. Normal November sounds. "That's a lot to read into me going home," I said. "Maybe." She unfolded her arms. "Or maybe you're just scared of what happens if you stay and nobody runs you off." I didn't have anything ready for that. She stepped away from the counter and nodded toward the living room. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Go back in, sit down, don't say a word if you don't want to. Then leave if you still want to. And what does that prove? "Probably nothing," she said. "But you won't know until you try it." I stood there with my keys in my hand and my jacket already half-zipped, and told myself this was not a conversation I needed to finish. I had a perfectly functional life and a perfectly reasonable habit, and it had never caused me any real problems. That was what I told myself. Then I put my keys back in my pocket. Simone didn't make a thing of it. She just went back into the living room like I had always been planning to follow her. I stayed 25 minutes. Nobody asked me why I was still there. Garrett didn't look up when I sat back down on the floor by the radiator. His neighbor handed me a beer. His friend Kenji was in the middle of a story about a camping trip in Algonquin that had gone sideways in a way that was genuinely funny, and I listened to it and laughed when it was funny. And when Garrett finished talking about his dad and the room got quiet again, I stayed in it instead of finding the door. Simone was on the arm of the couch the whole time. She didn't check on me, she was just there. When I finally left, with everyone else not before, she was standing by the door holding cups to bring to the kitchen. "You stayed," she said. "You said 10 minutes, she agreed, "and you stayed 25. Very overachieving." I laughed. She smiled. I went home and sat in my car on Elgin Street longer than I needed to, keys resting on my knee, looking at nothing in particular. I had stayed. The room hadn't turned on me. The ceiling hadn't lowered. Nothing bad had happened at all, and somehow that felt stranger than anything I'd expected. The next morning she texted me. I was at the shop. I work at a small renovation company in the Glebe, mostly residential, the kind of work where you're in someone's kitchen for 3 weeks and end up knowing more about their family than their own cousins do. And I had one hand in a bag of tile samples when my phone buzzed. "Simone, 25 minutes. That's almost a record for you." I stared at it for a while. It wasn't flirty, it wasn't heavy, it lived in that small, uncomfortable space between teasing and actually meaning something. I typed 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Finally sent. "Don't make it weird." She answered right away. "Too late." You're already thinking about it. I put my phone face down on the counter and told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next week and a half, she kept showing up in small ways. She sent me a picture of Garrett passed out on the couch with his mouth open and wrote, "Your best friend says he's just resting between opinions." She asked if we kept quarter-round trim at the shop because her mom's bathroom baseboard was rotting at the corner. One afternoon, she responded to something I posted about parking in the Byward Market with, "Did you just complain about parking downtown on a Saturday like a 40-year-old? Nothing she sent was too much. Nothing asked for anything. That made me answer every time. By Thursday of the following week, I was checking my phone between site visits and pretending I wasn't waiting for her name to appear. Garrett noticed something. He came by the shop on a Friday to pick up a caulking gun he'd borrowed and left sitting in my truck, and when he walked in, he pointed at my face. "What's happening there?" he said. "Nothing. You look like a person who's thinking about something they don't want to admit they're thinking about. I look like a person who's trying to sort tile samples." He picked up the caulking gun from the shelf. "Is it Simone? Don't? It's Simone Garrett." He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, grinning in the specific way that made me understand why people sometimes found him annoying. "She's been less miserable lately," he said. "She made actual pancakes last weekend. Not from a box." I didn't say anything. "That's a Simone sign," he said. "Pancakes from scratch." I pointed at the door and he left laughing. His parents' anniversary dinner was the following Saturday, at his mom's place in Barhaven, and he'd told me weeks ago I was invited because his mom liked me better than half his actual family. The house was a split level on a quiet street, the kind with a cold storage room and carpet in the basement, and a kitchen that smelled like it had been cooking something since 1997. Good smell. The right kind of house for a November gathering. I showed up 12 minutes late, and Garrett opened the door and looked at me like I had broken a rule. "You're early," he said. "I'm 12 minutes late." "For you, that's early." He stepped aside. "You usually find a reason to bail on things like this." I pushed past him into the hall. The main floor was full. His aunt had come from Kingston. There were cousins I recognized from previous occasions, and some I didn't. Kids in socks running the hallway. His dad at the kitchen island with a glass of red wine, telling a story with his whole body. His mum moving between the dining room and the stove in the way that mothers move in their own kitchens, which is to say like the whole room is an extension of them. And Simone at the kitchen table, cutting a cranberry loaf into slices and placing them on a wooden board. She had her hair down, a dark green sweater, and she looked up when I came into the kitchen the same way she always did. Not like she was waiting, more like she had simply known I'd eventually appear. "You made it," she said. "Garrett guilted me. Garrett guilted everyone. You still showed up." She slid the board toward me. "Make yourself useful. Take this to the table." Not hello, not a question, just, "Make yourself useful." Like I already belonged in the motion of the evening, I took the board. For the next hour and a half, she kept folding me into things without making it a project. When her aunt needed help carrying chairs from the basement, Simone said my name before I had time to step backwards. When a cousin started a game of crib at the dining table, she pulled a chair out and said, "You're playing," like it had already been decided. When the food came out and I was standing near the archway doing my usual thing, present but adjacent. Close enough to be there, far enough to leave. She put a plate in my hand without asking if I wanted one. It wasn't surveillance. She wasn't watching me. It was more like she noticed the exact second I started becoming background, and she gave me a small specific reason not to. By 8:30 the anniversary cake had been cut, and his dad had told the same story about their first apartment in Sudbury twice, and people were settling into the slower part of the evening. Chairs turned inward, voices dropped. I felt it in my body before I registered it consciously, the particular shift I had been responding to my whole adult life. I looked toward the front hall. I calculated the cleanest line to the coat rack. Then Simone appeared beside me with 2 empty dessert plates. "Shoppers," she said. "What?" "We're out of cream for the coffee and my mum wants ginger snaps. Come with me." I looked at the living room, at the front hall, at her. "Why me?" "Because you're already planning your exit and this gives you one that isn't rude." I couldn't argue with that, so I didn't. We took her car, a white Civic with a cracked dashboard mount, and a stack of reusable grocery bags stuffed in the back seat. She drove through Barhaven with the ease of someone who had grown up on those streets and never completely let go of them. One hand on the wheel, radio on low. Outside the windows, the suburb did its quiet November thing. Tim Hortons signs, Canadian Tire parking lot half full. That specific flatness of the suburban dark that I used to find boring and now just found familiar. For a couple minutes we didn't say much. Then I said, "You do that on purpose." "Do what?" "Give me something to do, right when I'm about to disappear." She kept her eyes on the road. "Sometimes." I waited. She didn't elaborate. That's it, I said, that's it. No explanation? I'm trying to do less explaining. I looked out the passenger window. We passed the community center, the little strip mall with the Vietnamese bakery that Garrett swore had the best banh mi in the city, the Catholic church with its sign out front that someone had rearranged to be mildly inappropriate. Streets I had driven on dozens of times without feeling much about them. They felt different from the passenger seat with Simone's hands on the wheel. At the Shoppers we split the list. She got the cream. I found the ginger snaps in the baking aisle between two elderly men arguing about whether store brand was actually worse. When I brought them to the front, she was already at the till. The pharmacist behind the counter was a woman named Linda who knew Simone by name and asked about her mum's new blood pressure medication before ringing anything through. Small-town behavior inside a city, which was a very Ottawa thing. When we got back to the car, Simone didn't start it right away. She sat with the keys in her hand looking through the windshield at the parking lot. I keep waiting to feel normal again, she said. Being back here. I looked at her. How long does it take? I don't know. I've been asking myself that since July. She tilted the keys against her palm. In Vancouver, I had the whole thing set up. Good job, apartment, someone I thought I was building something with. Very together-looking life. What happened? She gave a short laugh that had no real humor in it. I stayed too long because I didn't want to admit I'd been wrong about all of it. The job wasn't going anywhere. The relationship was already done in everything but name. But I kept thinking if I stayed another few months it would correct itself. The car was very quiet. Outside, someone's shopping cart wheel made a high-pitched sound crossing the pavement. That doesn't sound like you, I said. What sounds like me to you? She turned to look at me. You've known me as Garrett's sister for 3 years. Fair, but you always seem like someone who knows when to leave something. She held my gaze for a moment. I'm starting to think knowing when to leave and actually leaving are completely different skills. I didn't have a response to that. She started the car. We drove back without music. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that meant something was being understood between us that didn't need to be spoken yet. Things after that became harder to name. There was a night 2 weeks later when Garrett's power went out in a windstorm. One of those November systems that comes off the Ottawa River and makes the whole city feel temporary. His dad and I had just finished dragging the patio furniture into the garage when Simone came outside with a flashlight and a second jacket she tossed at me. We ended up in her dad's truck in the driveway waiting out the worst of it. Rain on the roof. The kind of storm that makes the inside of a car feel very small. She had her knees up, feet on the seat, and I had one hand resting near the door handle the way I always did. Not because I wanted to leave, just because my body liked knowing where the handle was. You always sit like that, she said. Like what? Like you're keeping your options open. I moved my hand into my lap. She didn't make a comment. After a while, because the storm was still going, and the silence had been there long enough that it felt safe, I said, I think I don't know how to stay somewhere without feeling like I'm making myself too available. She looked at me in the dark. Like if I stay, people can see that I'm there, that I care. And once they can see that, they can decide it's not enough. Simone was quiet for long enough that I regretted it. Then she said, I think that's actually the most honest thing you've ever said in a conversation that wasn't about tile grout. I laughed in spite of myself. She smiled. Then she said, quieter. But I think you're describing a way of protecting yourself that costs you everything you're protecting yourself for. The truck went quiet again. The windows had fogged at the edges. I could see her reflection overlaid on the storm outside, softer than her actual face, watching me the way she always watched me. Like she wasn't trying to close the distance, just refusing to pretend it didn't exist. I turned toward her. She turned toward me at the same moment. For one full second, neither of us made a joke or found a reason to look away. Then Garrett banged on the hood of the truck and yelled, Power's back, weirdos. Come inside, it's freezing. Simone dropped her head and laughed, and I hit my elbow on the door and said something I won't repeat. After that, I couldn't pretend I was staying because it was convenient. 3 days later, she texted me directly, not through Garrett. Not framed as a favor or a group thing. Simone. The Bytown's doing a double feature this Friday. Old films, 35mm, the full experience. I was going to go, you should come. I read it in the parking lot of a site in Westboro, half-eaten sandwich in one hand. You should come. Not us, not Garrett. Me specifically, I knew what the message meant. I had been watching myself figure out what it meant for weeks. I liked her, that was the simple version. The longer version was that I liked the way she didn't require anything from me except presence. And I liked that she had noticed the worst habit I had without making me feel defective about it. And I liked that she told the truth about herself in parking lots and storms. And I liked the particular way she looked when she was pretending. A joke wasn't funnier than she wanted to admit. All of which was exactly why I put the phone in my jacket pocket without answering. I told myself I'd reply after the afternoon. After the afternoon I looked at the message again and felt the familiar locked door feeling. Worse than usual because I knew I was doing it, and I still didn't answer. Friday came, I hadn't answered. At 8 in the evening she sent one more message. Simone, it's okay. See you around. 3 words that were polite and final, and landed like a door closing at a reasonable volume. Not a slam, which was somehow worse. I drove past the Bytown on Bank Street on the way home. I could see the lights of the marquee from the street. I could see people going in. I drove around the block twice and told myself it was traffic. And then I went home and sat on my apartment floor, with the lights off for 45 minutes like a person who had made an excellent decision. I avoided her for 4 days. This required some effort in a city that size in a friendship group that small. I skipped the Thursday dinner at Garrett's. I left a party at Kenji's early enough that she hadn't arrived yet. On Saturday morning I drove an extra 8 minutes to a different grocery store, to avoid the metro on Elgin, where I knew she sometimes did her weekly shopping. On Sunday evening, sitting in my car in my own building's parking garage going nowhere, I called Garrett. Second ring. Is this about Simone? I messed up. Silence. Then, yeah, she's been quiet how, just quiet. Not sad quiet, just. She stopped making the pancakes. He paused. She's fine. She's just recalibrated her expectations, and you know how she is when she does that. I did know. Simone recalibrating was not dramatic. She didn't send follow-up messages. She didn't ask Garrett to broker anything. She just quietly adjusted where she put her attention and moved on. Because she had already learned once the cost of staying somewhere that wasn't working. That was the thing that got me moving. I'm going over there, I said. Good. Don't tell her. I'm not her secretary, Garrett. I'm already not listening to this conversation, he said and hung up. Her light was on when I parked outside. I sat in the car for exactly 30 seconds. I actually counted, then got out before the 30 seconds became 5 minutes, and the 5 minutes became a reason to leave. The stairs to her apartment creaked on every step. I knocked, heard movement. Then the door opened and she was there in a dark gray hoodie, hair up, face neutral in a way that I recognize now as her being careful. Hey, I said. Hey, no joke, no bridge. She leaned one shoulder against the frame and waited. I'm sorry, I said, for not answering, and for driving past the theater. Something shifted in her expression barely. You drove past. Twice. She looked at me steadily. I kept going. I wanted to come. That's not something I'm saying to make this easier. The second I read your message I wanted to say yes. I wanted to go to a film at the Bytown on 35mm with you and buy overpriced popcorn and make fun of whoever cried at a black and white movie. I stopped, and then I didn't answer because it wasn't a group thing or a favor. You were asking me specifically, and I didn't know what to do when I couldn't pretend I was just around. The landing was cold. Somewhere below a door shut. Simone looked at me for a long moment without saying anything that would make it easier for me. I'm not upset that you couldn't come, she finally said. I'm upset that you left me wondering if I'd read the whole thing wrong. That landed exactly where it was supposed to. You didn't, I said. I know that now. I didn't know it Friday night, I know, and I'm sorry for that specifically. She held the door open another moment. Then she stepped back. You can come in. There's tea. Tea sounds intense. It's chamomile. Try to handle it. I walked in. Her apartment was the same half-unpacked version of itself. More boxes broken down now, a few things on the walls, but still that feeling of someone deciding how permanent to make herself. We sat on her couch with mugs and the window open a crack because she ran warm, and the radiator was original to the building, and had opinions about temperature control. The conversation wasn't easy. She told me plainly that patience wasn't infinite, that she'd come back to Ottawa already having stayed too long in one situation that drained her, and she wasn't going to set up another one, where she was doing all the work of showing up. I heard it without finding a way to reroute it into something more comfortable. That took more effort than I expected. But I stayed. The next Friday Garrett had people over. Just the usual. Pizza on the coffee table, someone's controlling the music badly. Kenji insisting on a card game that nobody fully understood. Simone was on the floor by the coffee table when I arrived, sorting a deck of cards with the focused expression of someone who was going to take the game very seriously. She looked up when I came in. Not a full smile yet, but close. I sat down beside her. Garrett made a face at me from across the room that I ignored completely. Kenji dealt the cards. Simone explained the rules to me even though I'd played this game before, and I let her because the explaining meant her shoulder was close to mine and she used her hands when she talked. Later, after the pizza, after the game, after Oliver's friend arrived with a six-pack and a story about a parking ticket that somehow took 20 minutes to tell. The room did the thing it always did, settled, softened, the music dropped. Someone turned the overhead light off and left only the floor lamp in the corner. Voices went quieter and realer. I felt it. The same signal I had been answering for my entire adult life. I picked up the empty pizza boxes from the table. Simone's eyes moved to me once. "Taking these out," I said. "Then I'll be back." I went out to the building's recycling room, broke down the boxes, shoved them in the cardboard slot. In the hallway outside the apartment, I stood for a moment. The elevator was right there, the stairwell beside it, the street below waiting like it always waited. I thought about the truck in the driveway, the shopper's parking lot, the message I hadn't answered, the door I had nearly closed from the outside. Then I went back in. Simone had moved to make room for me without making it obvious she'd done it. I sat beside her closer than before, her knee was against mine. Neither of us moved. A few minutes later, under Kenji and Garrett arguing about whether a run of clubs counted if someone had drawn out of turn, Simone turned toward me and said quietly, "You came back." I looked at her. I didn't reach for a joke or a deflection or a way to make it smaller than it was. I said I would, I told her. She smiled. Real and small, the kind that doesn't perform. And she passed me a card from the top of her pile like she was letting me into something she had been holding for a while. I stayed until Kenji finally admitted he'd been making up the rules since round 2. Until Garrett's mum called from Barhaven to say she'd seen his lights on. Until the pizza was gone, and the tea was cold, and the November night outside had gotten properly dark. I didn't leave because I was afraid of what staying might cost me. I left because the night had ended, and I would be back on Friday, and the week between didn't feel like waiting anymore. It felt like the ordinary shape of something I had chosen.